Everybody gets it hard up sometimes. I was standing on East Cairo Street one day. I was standing on East Cairo Street one day. Standing on East Cairo Street one day. One dime was all I had. Mama, don't treat your daughter mean. Mama, don't treat your daughter mean. Mama, don't treat your daughter mean. That's the meanest woman a man must ever see. You want your friend to be bad like Jesse James. You want your friend to be bad like Jesse James. You want your friend to be bad like Jesse James. Get 206 shooters highway, some faster train. One dime was all I had. One dime was all I had. One dime was all I had. Trying to be a sporting lad. I bought that morning news on. I brought that morning news. I bought that morning news. Then I bought a cigar too.
All right, all right. Here we are. Let me stop our lovely music and take off the ticker. Hopefully everyone can hear me. And if you're in the chat, you can comment, whether you're directly joining our webinar or on LinkedIn or YouTube or some other place we're broadcasting. I am Nathan Freitas, Director at Guardian Project and lead on cleaninsights.org project. And I'm joined by my Tiffany and collaborator and partner Tiffany, who I will now add to the webinar. Boom. Hello. Oops, you're on mute, but hopefully.
That's right. Hello. Thank you.
Hello. Really excited to have all of you here today who were invited, and some are dropping in. And Tiff, thanks for joining me. This is usually when we do our "What Are You Drinking" podcast channel, and I'll share. I have something very insightful in its sort of lightness, the sparkling Fresca drink, which it seems healthy. It's one of those things that, like, are there secret ingredients? Is there secret data, toxic data in here? As refreshing as it seems, I keep looking at the ingredient level, worrying there's something in here because it's so delicious. Can it really be this good and have no sugar? I don't know.
Well, in honor of our "What Are You Drinking?", I am having a cup of coffee this morning.
Excellent.
Still early here.
Ooh. Well, we are also joined by John Hess, another of our Clean Insights leads, who's been really working on our implementations with partners, working on our SDKs and planning and a lot of the outreach. So thanks for joining us today, John, as well.
And I brought Penguin with me, lurking in the background.
And is that something you're drinking? What are you drinking?
Oh, I made a French press of coffee, but I have to confess that I'm out of insightful beans, so this is an inferior blend.
All right, well, we'll get to the beans and teas soon. So for now, I'm going to jump into our presentation since we have a lot of guests here and we just want to get down to our business. So really excited to focus on this topic today. And We've done various talks on clean insights over the last few years of our work on this program. But this one's particularly important in that it's a different focus. Previously, our focus has been on implementers, on developers, programs, designers, project leads, those seeking to measure and monitor and understand the impact they have, but maybe looking to do it in a way that is more private and more consent driven. Today, we're talking to funders, people that are providing support in various ways, that are empowering people that want to go out and make positive change and to bring important support to programs, and asking funders to have a little bit more influence on how monitoring and evaluation, it's kind of a funder terminology, but how measurement and analytics is implemented. So excited to take this angle on it today, and thanks for joining us, those of you who consider yourself a funder or a program lead or an organization that supports others doing this kind of work. We'll get to the insightful bean topic, but we do love coffee and tea around here. And if later on there's some opportunity for you to get your own insightful tea, the beans are not being roasted anymore, but maybe we'll do a special, return of the beans soon. So the core idea behind Clean Insights is this. Do you want to fund the kind of program that knows exactly how long a specific person spent on a website? Like, you spent this long on this page on this website. Or do you want the program to be able to understand how, through a redesign or improvement in their content, was there an increase in the time that beneficiaries or users spent, right? What matters here? Are we trying to target and track a specific person for advertising? Probably not. But if we understand is funding being used in a way that has increased the benefit and the value so that the communities that we're trying to support are spending more time? So ultimately, the issue is that once you have data, it can be misused and repurposed and used for other things. And so our goal with Clean Insights is to never have that toxic asset in the first place. And so the idea beyond this is that, we don't need to know specifically about how different people, say, looked at information on health, exactly which user researched what topic. We don't need to know that. Anonymity is possible. We don't want to hold data like specific IP addresses that can become toxic and misused and abused and extracted by adversaries and of various kinds. We want to keep a kind of vow of confidentiality about the information and the data, and allow the user to control that data themselves. And we want to minimize sort of legal risks and headaches. We appreciate all of these new policies that are being implemented around the world, being with the leadership of GDPR. And the less you are a data processor and the less you capture, the easier it is to be legally compliant. So back to the idea of data as a toxic asset. The more data you hold onto, the longer you hold on to it, the more likely it will be leaked or exfiltrated by an adversary. And so this is a list, I think, that John put together of and found somewhere, of all these reports of different years of different kinds of sites, from medical sites to travel sites to ancestry sites, and the records and the data and how the data was leaked, whether it was accidentally, whether it was a hack, criminal, malicious adversary, bad security. It happens. It's inevitable if you're holding on to it. And these are this, in a sense, somewhat accidental. The other side of it is then actual, sort of malicious, in a sense of a suicide hotline case where you're actually taking data for beneficial purposes, and then someone says, oh, now we're going to make a for-profit version of the service that was just funded by a grant or a foundation, and we're going to use all that data, right? And so that repurposing there is really also what we want to stop from happening, especially in sensitive areas with already beneficiaries who are already under such duress and harm and stress that we don't want to harm more. At this point, this is a little bit dated, but it's always interesting to understand that even the idea of what book you checked out from the library has been something that has been targeted in the past. And librarians, as always, we love them because they understand this need for libraries to be a place of exploration and openness, and that you should be able to go to a library and free your mind to learn and understand without feeling like every book and every page and everything you do at a library is being monitored for law enforcement purposes. So be careful what you read, right? The flip side of this is the modern smart car, the fully connected car that's very difficult to avoid these days, where a vast amount of data of not just where you go, but how you corner, how fast you press the brakes, do you charge, and how often is being stored and tracked and can be used against you at any point in time. And so this is a case where a journalist wrote something negative about a Tesla, and then the chairman of that company turned around, extracted the data, and used it against them. So also be careful how you drive these days, and understand, librarians, yes, are champions in some way of this kind of thinking. Car companies are not. And so as a funder, you need to understand who you're funding. Are you funding librarians or automotive type industry mentalities? This is the culture change we're also seeking from the top down as funders. So our methodology here that we've developed with Clean Insights has been around consent. We'll talk more about that. Again, this sort of anonymity and confidentiality and toxic assets reduce, collect only what you need, aggregate the data early into knowledge and not just raw data, understand what's happening and not who is happening, keep the data on your own servers that you control, no third parties, and use proxies of various sorts. One we've implemented in our toolkit to reduce and remove data as it's processed through the system, not to add more data, right? So this is an approach that we've outlined both as like a methodology as well as actual tools and technology. We won't be focusing today as much on the tools and technology, since that is a different kind of talk, but we have them and others have them too. So this is less saying you must use Clean Insights and more, these are things that are appropriate for programs to be considering in their data collection practices. And this is a great one. I think, John, you came up with this example, and I'll put you on the spot for a moment to talk through it, but because I think it was a good realization you had.
Yeah. So there are a lot of ways to collect data that keep things private, but get the job done and teach you what you're trying to learn. And we often find ourselves dealing with exactly this problem when we talk about voting, right? Like, what does it mean to have a secret ballot? Does everyone know what I voted for? Do people know that I voted, but not what I voted for? And there's all kinds of questions and different ways you might shape it. And these are different ballot boxes. Some are historical. One of them is local to me here in Madison, but there's a lot of different ways that you can vote and have confidence that in the end, the total is going to be tallied correctly, but still keep your own personal privacy.
And it's also a decentralized model, right? Where you have all of this aggregation at the edge, right? And so this is everything that's old is new again in some ways. The inspiration that I particularly took early on with our work in this area was actually from the Tor project, one of the oldest internet freedom technology providers, developers, and kind of a champion of anonymity, right? Of not knowing anything. This is what Tor is about. But early on, they realized if they wanted to receive funding, they needed a way to tell their funders, is it working? How many users are using it? Are there users in this country using it? And so fundamental to the Tor design and their culture was implementing a monitoring an evaluation system that included, measurements ingrained in their privacy-preserving protocol that would allow them to understand specifically what they needed to know and nothing more. That would use a lot of the same methodology that we have outlined today around removing data, proxying, decentralization, and also had this beautiful portal and dashboard that's evolved so that transparency was also key. They weren't keeping the data secret. They were showing the world everything that they knew about you so that people would feel comfortable with this approach to the measurement. In a similar way, a spin-off from Tor called the Open Observatory of Network Interference, UNI, has built a whole practice around allowing anyone to opt in to give consent to use their computer or their phone to be part of a censorship measurement network. Now, in this case, they do know more about you, but you are saying it's okay because I want to be part of something big in the world. I want to contribute my data and my measurements. And they actually have this whole really beautiful consent-driven process where they really make sure you know what you're doing. Tor doesn't need to have that much on the consent front because it's so privacy preserving and they only take little bits. UNI, on the other hand, can tell you a lot and you contribute to an open data set, but you are okay with it. And they make sure you are. So these are two great examples that have inspired us in different ways. So why is it that we're saying funders should do this, that they should require this? This should be part of a budget line item. It should be a risk assessment step. It should be, just ask, what analytics are you using? How are you keeping that data private? And I know different funders and programs already do aspects of this, already have expectations around personal information and maybe keeping things encrypted on drives, but also sometimes when you get to the digital part of the implementation, some of the kind of more human-driven, ethical review board type process goes away. So what are we asking? Well, I've been around this work long enough when I remembered that security audits were not expected. Code review, code audits. This is now, at least in the internet freedom and human rights technology space, a normal thing for a funder to ask for, to be funded. And in the early days of internet freedom in sort of 2009, there was a moment where Iran was in turmoil. There was a lot of censorship happening, and people were coming out of the woodworks with technology solutions. And at that point, a great champion of internet freedom, Secretary Clinton, found, somehow this one solution really got escalated. It's like, this is working. This is it. It's really saving Iranians and helping them. And it went from like a guy hacking by himself to being promoted by the US government without a security audit. And then others looked at it and did an audit independently and found, in fact, it was kind of highlighting, rather than hiding people and helping them get through censorship, it was actually flagging the people who were using the tool and creating more harm. And this was uncovered with a 6-hour security audit. And it really, not only potentially harmed Iranians, but also the whole space was suddenly suspect in saying, well, are you just like techno utopians thinking you can solve the world, but you're not taking the care? There's no duty of care. There's nothing. So this process then was really important to implement at that time. And one of the great champions and change makers has been the Open Technology Fund, one of our funders and a great pioneer in internet freedom funding that, supported things like Signal from very early on. And they have created what used to be called the Red Team Lab, but is now the Security Lab, where anyone can go to get a free audit. You can apply, go through a process, and they will fund from a pool of vendors security audits of code, of software, of systems, of infrastructure and servers. And this has really been a game changer. I know other funders now require you to budget audits for code audits, and there's a whole market of people that can provide this that are known and vetted as open source security audit companies. And this is now the norm, and it's great. And it's this kind of change we want to see within monitoring and evaluation, implementation through digital measurement. So the flip side is we do understand how data can help, right? It's not that we're saying there should be no data tracked, but we want to figure out how, again, a funder can help guide people that they are supporting to do this well. Data is everywhere, and it's one of those things we can't ignore. It's the same thing of like, look, we know everyone's going to have a mobile phone, and we should build human rights and internet freedom software for mobile phones. We understand there's problems with mobile phones in terms of surveillance and tracking, but that's where the people are. In the same way of data, right? There's a vast amount of things we could learn, and we can't just say, no, we're not going to look at anything. We need to understand how to use the signals that are already there in a way that can help. So what we want is just that expectation that any design of measurement and analytics around monitoring and evaluation comes, again, with this privacy-focused, consent-driven design. So this is getting redundant a bit at this point, but transparency, very important. Minimization, very important. Aggregating data early and not keeping the raw logs of data around, very important. And generalizing so that you can say, rather than GPS specific location points, do it at the city or the state or the country level, right? Limit the time window. These are all things of kind of diluting the information. And these are on our website as part of our methodology and the kind of thing that we can help you build into your expectations. This is part of our Getting Started guide for developers that we have available as well, so that there are resources that if you say, hey, we think you should follow this process, again, we can help them think through this work, whether they use our tools or not. And that's a very important point. Given the, okay, so beyond that is design is also very important. And I mentioned this a little bit. Tiffany, I know you're here with some of that. Carrie was on camera for a minute, who actually leads some of this work with us. But anything you want to share, perhaps, Tiff, about really quick are the best practices guides and content that we've published around consent?
Sure. We have a lot. Oh, and I see that Carrie is here, so we could also bring her back on screen. There she is. Awesome. So I'll just say that we have a lot of great content up, and we're continually publishing new content to our doc site. It's there's a link right there on the screen, docs.cleaninsights.org. And actually, I'll just pass it to Carrie so she can talk about consent, because she's the expert in the house.
Hey, yeah, I think the thing to highlight for consent related, especially related to funding programs, and to be mindful of is what we've observed in working with teams is people have different audiences and with different levels of concern. So a lot of these are privacy-centric tools. So most people are mindful, and they tend to be hesitant about wanting to collect any sort of data or give any indication to people that they're tracking. So we want to think about consent in a way that can be mindful of the audience itself and how the team thinks their audience will perceive them integrating some sort of tracking or measurement. I think this is one of the biggest things. What we've worked on in the consent stuff most recently in the guidance is how we think about opt-in consent versus opt-out. Sometimes it's important to be clever about how you ask people to opt in or to participate in something. Yeah, so we've kind of, again, in the guidance, you can see some thoughts about how to think about that. And just to clarify, an opt-out experience versus opt-in. An opt-out experience is going to say, we're doing this in a very privacy-preserving way. We're not collecting PII, personal information, PII. We're good on GDPR. We're going to collect it without having the user explicitly say it's okay for you to collect this. Even an opt-out experience, we would always recommend that in settings or somewhere, someone can opt out and say, I don't want to be a part of this. But by the default would be that they are a part of it. That's opt out.
Yeah. And as I mentioned, we've looked at Uni and some of these other examples, and I showed some of these before here. It's clever. It's also thoughtful. And whether this is an app or a website or a program, really making sure that people understand what they are doing and why they're doing it and the life cycle of the data. And, this idea that we don't give people long pages and policies. It uses language that helps them understand why this might improve the program. And the sort of, lifespan, the time window of this data. The problem we see, I just was setting up a new iPhone, and Apple, even a champion of kind of privacy, really has this one, once, right when you set up, do you want to help us or not? Right at the beginning, right? And you kind of glaze over and you don't understand how it's helping. And so we really still think this model of giving people different chances to participate in and being more transparent about it is quite important. Whether, again, this is, we show a lot of app examples because that's what we built, but there's many ways that these guidelines for opt-in consent can be applied. And so I guess, Tip or Carrie, we've also tried to figure out different ways and time contexts in which you can implement measurement. What about the idea of like a focus group versus, say, just build it into a website versus build it into like a specific focused effort? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, this is something that, again, this came out of exploring different ways that we can use opt-in consent to better understand. But in this case, for example, instead of saying, oh, we're going to measure, or we're going to ask everyone if they want to opt in, we paired it with an actual like focus study that we're doing on an application. And for 2 weeks, we had people involved in it. Look, it's sort of parallel qualitative study. But we were using the instrumentation of Clean Insights to collect some metrics. We sort of had this hypothesis to say, like, okay, if we can and talk with them and understand what they're experiencing, but also kind of see on the back end how much active use is actually getting, the timeliness of things, which parts of the app they're using, then we could better have a better like sort of debrief discussion to understand how well things were or weren't working. So that was the idea behind that, and sort of an interesting approach.
Yeah, and we have case studies for these on the cleaninsights.org website. Again, that we've documented, and I think the scale of time. Is it something you're running for a whole program, a specific time window, a specific event, a specific group? And then when it comes to insights, you don't necessarily need, I need 1 million people. If you have 10 people, if you design the insight for those 10 people, it can be helpful to understand. So this is, again, different approaches and scales at which you can implement. I'll pull John back in real quick here because, again, on the technical implementation front, we know that there's a lot of tools people are already using. Google Analytics is very familiar to people, probably mostly on this call. What are these other solutions, and why might people choose them or not?
Well, I'm not going to necessarily endorse any one of them, but you could kind of separate things into privacy preserving, non-privacy preserving, full-blown kind of surveillance capitalism, and you can figure out what meets your needs. So there are things out there like Clean Insights, and we take, let's call it a privacy maximalism approach. But there's a lot of other things out there that are privacy oriented. So one form of privacy is first-party hosting. So maybe I want to collect the same kinds of things I would get through Google Analytics, but I don't want to send it to Google. I'd like to send it just to me. And so Matomo is an option for doing that. There are also options out there, Plausible, Fathom, that say, hey, you know what? I don't actually, like you opened talking about Nate, like, do I need to know that Nathan at 11:28 a.m. on Thursday, June 13th, clicked on this button, and 6 seconds later clicked on this one, and have your entire history there? Like, well, no, maybe not. Maybe what I want to collect is a little bit more minimal. And so with Plausible or Fathom, what you can do is collect a little bit more minimal data that even if it were out there, is probably not nearly so toxic. You can do that and kind of mix and match the idea of like, do I want to still first party host that? Or do I just want to collect minimal data? Or you go the clean insights, which is kind of both of those things. So you have the option to first party host. You're also collecting, with tweezers instead of a vacuum cleaner. So you kind of figure out what's appropriate for your circumstance and what your use case and users need.
And this, all comes down, this is applicable to both, websites, apps, survey forms, Google Docs, any kind of thing you direct your community to say, give us feedback, log your information. Are you tying their identity to data they're entering? And do you have control over that data? And are you hosting that infrastructure yourself? Or are you relying on commercial free cloud infrastructure? And this is, again, really important when you're considering what tracking you're exposing to either your own implementation or others. So in the case of like, hey, we're doing a monitoring and evaluation process and we want everyone to fill out a Survey Monkey versus or a Google form versus we're going to use a CryptPad form or self-host Lime survey on our own servers. This all plays into effect. If you're using third-party services, you don't have control. Are they using Google Analytics or Adobe or Fathom or whatever? If you are running your own infrastructure, you do have control and choice about this topic. So there's lots of things out there. As a way to uncover this, we have implemented our toxic asset audit program. Tiffany, how do we let people join and have their very own personal toxic asset audit?
It's very simple. You can reach out to one of us directly, or if you go to our website, cleaninsights.org/toxic, there is a Calendly there, and you can sign up, schedule one. It's free. It's really meant to be more of a conversation. So it'll be probably about 30 minutes where we'll just talk about your product, your website, discuss how are you hosting? Have you investigated your third-party application if you're using one, and what data it might be leaking or even collecting? So it's really hopefully a lightweight opportunity for you to get more information and more insights about your app, your product, your website in a way that we will assess for you and sort of identify and share any sort of results that we have, or just hopefully a lightweight, easy way for you to get information and take some initial steps based on recommendations that we have to become more free and less toxic.
Toxic. This is where funder in our audience today. Going back to the Technology Fund and the Security Lab, we would love to have this sort of toxic audit lab as a program, and not just us, but this idea of saying, have you audited yourself for your data retention, your analytics, your third-party, dependencies that you're exposing your beneficiaries to? Whether that's funded or something we do or what anyone does, just the concept that this should be done is important. And we have been doing these. This is something we, as Tiff said, can do very quick. We do a call, we talk you through it, we just kind of list everything out. This is, I live in Massachusetts in the US, and the state implemented a clean energy audit where for free, someone will come to your home. They'll look at your light bulbs, they'll look at your windows, your heating, and they'll just do a walkthrough, and they give you a report for free that says, well, you could do these things. They'll give you free, LED light bulbs, better power strips that turn stuff off and on. And it's this like quick pass that's broad but effective at getting people to take that first step in, say, moving towards more clean energy. And so we feel the toxic asset audit model is a way to move people towards clean insights.
Yeah, it reminds me a lot of, as you offered, like the clean energy audits, also just like regular checkups for cars and vehicles. These things are pretty commonplace in many of our lives. So why not do it in for our apps and our products and our websites as well? It's really just like a
Smog
litmus.
check.
Yeah,
Smog
a quick litmus test of kind of the health of our products.
So a few more case studies before we wrap up. And please, if you have questions on any platform you're on, please post them to our comments feed. You can also go to cleaninsights.org and find ways to contact us there or schedule meetings, different levels of privacy and options there for contacting us. The success stories we've had so far, and we have other podcast interviews with some of these great folks, but Mailvelope is the one we like to talk about the most, again, because it is a privacy-focused solution for secure email, encrypted email through your browser, and a really great team that has understand the value of implementing clean insights. So I'm going to let John tell this story because he did spend a lot of time and energy to make this a success. So what are we seeing here, John? It's a blank chart.
So I hope that the data fills in at some point. But what we're looking at here is kind of what happens when you're flying blind. So Mailvelope works with a whole bunch of different mail providers. If you use Gmail, if you use GMX, you use Yahoo, you can load up the extension and it will let you send PGP encrypted mail through that webmail provider. But making that work without any hitches in so many different UIs, anyone who's done browser extension development will tell you a lot of things can change there. And not only do you have several different user experiences you're managing, but you have a lot to keep up with in terms of what if Gmail changes its interface and so on. And so a conundrum that the Mailvelope team faced was like, okay, what providers do we prioritize as we try to allocate our development time? What are people actually using in the wild versus not using? You know, if 90% of your users are on one platform, like focus your attention there. An hour goes a longer way with that group. And being that they serve a really privacy conscious audience, they hadn't collected this data. They don't phone home with anything. You know, the kind of people that want to send PGP encrypted email, you know, they're sensitive to that. So we help them design a privacy preserving way that basically just once a week said, hey, by the way, someone out there used Gmail, right? It doesn't record who, doesn't record your long-term activity, and we get these results here. So I don't know if I'd ask you to kind of fill out this chart. I don't know what it would have looked like, because the question is not only what are the market share of these guys, but what are the market share among the kind of people that want to send PGP encrypted email? And so what we found, Gmail is the 800-pound gorilla in the space. Then you've got Outlook and all of its kind of Outlook-like flavors that are out there, depending on whether you're on enterprise, things of that nature. Yahoo, GMX, and so on were the big ones. So this kind of justified spending more time making sure the Gmail integration was working really well, which is nice. It's an opportunity to allocate what was really a scarce resource, which is development time.
But there's also, Gmail is obvious, but Outlook maybe not quite as obvious as in this space, but maybe it shows there was a growing, use by corporate or funders with more enterprise infrastructure, which is nice to find. And then Yahoo, what? That was a big insight.
Yeah, I mean, it all depends. Like you can end up, we all run in these circles of techies, or at least people like software developers do. And you go, no one uses Yahoo anymore. And it's like, well, no one you know does, but turns out a whole bunch of people do.
And then on the back of this success, we've worked with them again, and they said, yeah, let's do more, right? And so there's something new coming with Mailvelope, with the setup process and trying to understand success there or failures.
Yeah, we're looking at the funnel of onboarding, and we're going to be looking at it for just a small portion of the audience rather than asking everyone for consent. We'll just randomly select about 1% of people and ask for their consent and get the data that way.
Great. I'm just going to post a link here. The CEO of Mailvelope, Utah. We did a podcast there, and was this stream deleted on there? I hope not. Okay, something's happening there with the StreamYard link, but I don't know what. Okay, just to continue on here. We also had great luck with WeClock, and I'll pull Carrie back in on this because I know we work together on WeClock quite a bit. But tell me about WeClock really quick and how you think we implemented the measurement there in an effective way.
Okay, this has been a while. Yeah, okay, so WeClock is one of the functions of WeClock is to track your location. We kept kind of running into some funky things around locations, and we were wanting to know if it was accurate for people. Oh, you go back with just one. Yeah, thank you. We wanted to know if it was accurate for people because we kind of kept hearing randomly that like, it's doing something funky. So we actually, many of you, probably most people are familiar with the question at the end of an article that you're reading, maybe on Medium or somewhere else, a blog post or a support post, where it's like, was this helpful for you? Yes or no? We totally followed that model when it came to this idea of location accuracy. And so on the view where people see the map, they see kind of what we have visualized. We have that question of, does this look right to you, basically? And they give a thumbs up or a thumbs down. After they do that, we do provide some more information about, okay, we're gonna register this. We're gonna tell the team this is how we're protecting your data. We kind of unpack the picture after that. But I think the important thing in this case was that we can kind of get quick feedback from someone without having to kind of like walk them through, like, we'd like to measure you. We want to know this, right? So that was the idea behind it.
And so WeClock is a decentralized app for tracking your workday that we built with labor unions and cooperatives. And so it's, again, very privacy centered, where data doesn't leave your device until you choose. And so having this specific area where they could provide feedback on a specific feature where they were frustrated, and then giving them feedback on how to improve that was really, so this is very targeted around a specific thing, but also the users themselves got instant value from providing us feedback rather than just say, oh, tell us, and then maybe later we'll tell you if it helped. So this is that kind of transparency and engagement model that we talked about. Lastly, we worked with Tella, who's actually been trying a variety of different privacy preserving measurement solutions. We think everyone should, but we did work with them on their app for human rights documentation in a secure way. And they were trying to understand how people use the app, different features, and where they were struggling. Tip, I think you talked with Tella quite a bit. I don't know, and Carrie, but if anyone has thoughts on sort of Tella's path through implementing Clean Insights.
I actually didn't speak with them very much, and I know Carrie worked with them, so she might have something more to say. I was just going to lift up the fact that, like, in each of these cases, and you can read more about them on our doc site, but in each of these cases, it was really about understanding first what the sort of client wanted to understand, and what was really, like, it was about honing in on those questions that were really important for them to answer. And maybe it was for in order so they could design their roadmap, or maybe it was because, yeah, they were curious if the accuracy of the feature was working in the way that they understood it, or if people were having pain points. Tella had a number of things that they wanted to understand. And so it was really, I think a lot of the Clean Insights work is just working through the process with the client, the organization, the app, the product, the website, and understanding what is really important to learn and how can we measure that in a way that is as frictionless as possible to the user, but providing enough information to the user so that they can make an informed decision of whether or not they want to participate, and also just being mindful of all the privacy and security implications of user measurement.
Excellent. Well, I just realized our chat was not active everywhere, so I've now activated it if there are questions. But I did also want to do two things. One, I wanted to share that many of those groups and case studies we just talked to were actually supported through our work with Internews and their Sustain program. And Sustain has been a model for a funder who is actually implementing these programs and requirements and expectations around privacy with the goal of having more sustainability for free and open source software. And so there are models out there today where this has been supported and implemented, and we've participated in those, where there's been time and energy and funding given specifically to these programs to say, you should care about this and make time. The funder doesn't have that influence. There's so many other priorities often, and it's still too easy to just drop in Google Analytics or something like that. So we really appreciate the support and work of Sustain there. And, you know, we have also our fun side with our manifesto about cyber privacy unity and closing the all-seeing eyes. So if you believe that privacy is one or we are none, then please go to cleaninsights.org/tea to get some of our delicious tea sent to you. That will also be given out at the Global Gathering in Portugal in the fall, or many other places where we end up visiting. And we have these wonderful, united, hardworking, loving, trained, brave people helping you all send up that are part of our team, some of which are here on the call. And, you know, we are like really about thinking through this process, however you're ready to engage on it, and have ways to support you and connect your organizations with this type of thinking, and partner with us in different ways. And I wanted to share, briefly here before I do this. There we go. Let me go full screen again. Yeah, so this is the Sustain program from Internews and some of the great work they did at the Open Source Sustainability Symposium at FOSDEM last in Brussels, and the work with open source communities like Tella, Mailvelope, OpenWisp, OnionShare, Bionot, and they really, again, modeled this sort of work on sustainability overall for free and open source software in sensitive programs and how we do reporting and monitoring out of that. So again, shout out to them. And then, whoa, here we go. Let's see if I can figure this out lastly. All right, so that's really our pitch to you. Again, we remember the time before security audits, code audits were required and expected. And we just want to see this culture shift so that toxic asset audits or measurement audits or planning around privacy preserving measurement is, again, part of the expectations of funders when it comes to any sort of, you know, primarily digital monitoring and evaluation, though we think many of our approaches could be applied to all sorts of aspects of this work. So any closing thoughts from the rest of the team while we wait to see if anyone posts any comments? All right. I think we're almost done then. I'll see if we have any. We have some insight reports. Here we go. Impact reports, cleaninsights.org/impact. You can also get the toxic asset audits. I love these tickers. And yeah.
Nathan, maybe we could also offer, if anybody is interested in joining the podcast and want to talk, even from the funder perspective, that would be a really amazing opportunity to have a discussion. So our podcasts are on Thursdays. What Are You Drinking is what they are called. And if you're interested in joining and you want to talk about clean insights, if you want to talk about funding, if you want to talk about sustainability, privacy preserving metrics, your favorite drink, please.
And you can also, if you look up the NGuard podcast, let me actually stop and share this. Thank you for all of this. You can find us because there's actually a lot of great other things to listen to. NGuard, Guardian Project Podcast, on iTunes, Apple Podcasts, Google, wherever. So ENGARDE, but you can also come to guardianproject.info/podcast. And thank you, Heather. Glad you made it. And here we can show a little comment there. Thank you. All right, everybody. And our podcast has, in particular, this last interview with Jutta Horstman of Mailvelope was really great. We also had OpenWisp on, but we need to add that to this site. We have some other topics, but we do cover things like data fails of, it's just amazing how big companies continue to still fail at this. And, Intel had a moment that, it was just bad kind of consent user experience, I think. So we kind of dig into these different developments in the industry and help look at both big and small, both kind of human rights and big tech, that this is being tackled. So please subscribe to our podcast, and also on YouTube and wherever you're watching this. Actually, we tend to broadcast. So, okay, well, I think then we will end it here. Again, thanks to my team. And the music that we started with and that I will end with is, what was it called? It was the One Dime Blues by, hold on, I just had this up, free music. I thought it was a very good, there we go. Blind Lemon Jefferson, the One Dime Blues, where he seems to say, I'm really poor, but I only have one dime. But in fact, sometimes you can be quite rich. So if your goals are, this song is quite rich. He created a lot of insight for other people through this music. We only have a dime. Very rich otherwise. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
I'm broke and ain't got a dime.
Thank you.
I'm broke and I ain't got a dime. I'm broke and ain't got a dime. Everybody gets it hard up sometimes. I was standing on East Cairo Street one day. I was standing on East Cairo Street one day. Standing on East Cairo Street one day. One dime was all I had. Mama, don't treat your daughter mean. Mama, don't treat your daughter mean. Mama, don't treat your daughter mean. That's the meanest woman a man must ever see. You want your friend to be bad like Jesse James. You want your friend to be bad like Jesse James. You want your friend to be bad like Jesse James. Get 262 highway, some faster train. I had. One dime was all I had. One dime was all I had. Trying to be a sporting lad. I bought that morning news on. I brought that morning news. I brought